White House Part 1. The White House is the official residence and workplace of the President of the United States. It is located at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest in Washington, D.C., and has been the residence of every U.S. president since John Adams in 1800, when the national capital was moved from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. The term White House is often used as metonymy for the president and his advisors. The residence was designed by Irish-born architect James Hoban in the neoclassical style. Hoban modeled the building on Leinster House in Dublin, a building which today houses the Oireachtas, the Irish legislature. Construction took place between 1792 and 1800, using Aquia Creek sandstone painted white. When Thomas Jefferson moved into the house in 1801, he and architect Benjamin Henry Latrobe added low colonnades on each wing to conceal what then were stables and storage. In 1814, during the War of 1812, the mansion was set ablaze by British forces in the burning of Washington, destroying the interior and charring much of the exterior. Reconstruction began almost immediately, and President James Monroe moved into the partially reconstructed executive residence in October 1817. Exterior construction continued with the addition of the semicircular south portico in 1824 and the north portico in 1829. Because of crowding within the executive mansion itself, President Theodore Roosevelt had all work offices relocated to the newly constructed West Wing in 1901. 8 years later, in 1909, President William Howard Taft expanded the West Wing and created the first Oval Office, which was eventually moved and expanded. In the executive residence, the third-floor attic was converted to living quarters in 1927 by augmenting the existing hip roof with long shed dormers. A newly constructed East Wing was used as a reception area for social events. Jefferson's colonnades connected the new wings. The East Wing alterations were completed in 1946, creating additional office space. By 1948, the residence's load-bearing walls and wood beams were found to be close to failure. Under Harry S. Truman, the interior rooms were completely dismantled and a new internal load-bearing steel frame was constructed inside the walls. On the exterior, the Truman balcony was added. Once the structural work was completed, the interior rooms were rebuilt. The present-day White House complex includes the executive residence, the West Wing, the East Wing, the Eisenhower Executive Office Building, which served previously as the State Department, houses the offices of the President's staff and the Vice President, and Blair House, a guest residence. The executive residence is made up of 6 stories, the ground floor, state floor, second floor, and third floor, and a 2-story basement. The property is a National Heritage Site owned by the National Park Service and is part of the President's Park. In 2007, it was ranked second on the American Institute of Architects list of America's favorite architecture. Early history: 1789 to 1800. Further information: Presidency of George Washington Residences. Following his April 1789 inauguration, President George Washington occupied 2 private houses in New York City, which served as the executive mansion. He lived at the first, Franklin House, which was owned by Treasury Commissioner Samuel Osgood, at 3 Cherry Street, through late February 1790. The executive mansion moved to the larger quarters at Alexander McComb House at 39 to 41 Broadway, where Washington stayed with his wife Martha and a small staff until August 1790. In May 1790, construction began on a new official residence in Manhattan, called Government House. Washington never lived at Government House since the national capital was moved to Philadelphia in 1790, where it remained through 1800. The July 1790 Residence Act designated the capital be permanently located in the new federal district, and temporarily in Philadelphia for 10 years while the permanent capital was built. Philadelphia rented the mansion of Robert Morris, a merchant, at 190 High Street, now 524 to 30 Market Street, as the President's House, which Washington occupied from November 1790 to March 1797. Since the house was too small to accommodate the 30 people who then made up the presidential family, staff, and servants, Washington had it enlarged. President John Adams, who succeeded Washington and served as the nation's second president, occupied the High Street Mansion in Philadelphia from March 1797 to May 1800. Philadelphia began construction of a much grander presidential mansion several blocks away in 1792. It was nearly completed by the time of Adams' 1797 inauguration. However, Adams chose not to occupy it, saying he did not have congressional authorization to lease the building. It remained vacant until 1800 when it was sold to the University of Pennsylvania. On Saturday, November 1, 1800, Adams became the first president to occupy the White House. 14. The President's House in Philadelphia was converted into Union Hotel and later used for stores before being demolished in 1832. The first presidential mansion, Samuel Osgood House in Manhattan, occupied by Washington from April 1789 to February 1790. The second presidential mansion, Alexander Macomb House, in Manhattan, occupied by Washington from February to August 1790. The third presidential mansion, President's House in Philadelphia, occupied by Washington from November 1790 to March 1797. Occupied by Adams, March 1797 to May 1800. Government House in Manhattan, built in 1790 to 1791, was designed to be the permanent presidential mansion, but Congress moved the national capital to Philadelphia before its completion. President's House in Philadelphia, built in the 1790s, was not used by any president after the presidential mansion, known as the White House, was moved from Philadelphia to the new national capital of Washington, D.C.